Hello, so welcome to day 4 of 14 days of art and creativity. I hope you're managing to keep up, because with Anya and I both doing videos every day, you might find there's so much work to do that you're forgetting to eat and sleep. Make sure you do those things. But today, for day 4, I'm going to be doing a pastel drawing of these lovely daffodils that my daughter picked from the garden. And I'm going to show you a technique where you can draw with chalk pastels on top of charcoal. So there's probably 2 stages. I've got a box of chalk pastels, I've got a stick of willow charcoal, and I have a plastic rubber. The first stage is going to be to draw with the charcoal, to smudge it and rub it out. Then I'll pause a minute while I spray the drawing with some fixative, and then I'll start to put some colour on top. So I've got a big stick of charcoal, and I'm just going to snap it into something shorter that's easier to hold, because I'm not going to draw with the tip of it, I'm going to draw with the side of it. And I'll begin maybe down here with pot, the stripy pot that the flowers are in. And if you see, I'm just sliding the charcoal around on the page. I'm looking with my eyes half closed just to see what the rough shapes of these flowers are. But because I'm using this loose, it'll slide off, this loose side of the charcoal technique, everything is a little bit approximate, which is, I think, a very good way to start, because all these flowers of their different lengths, that might not quite fit on, I might squeeze that on. These flowers of these different lengths are quite hard to work out at first. You don't know exactly where they are. They've all got their petals. They're quite complicated, and I don't know them yet. I'm getting to know them, and I need to put something down on the page which I can adjust, something that I can refine. But I've got to start somewhere. So this way of drawing without any lines, putting down some shapes with the side of the charcoal, is helpful because it gets me started. I've got something to, as I've said, refine. But it's also helpful because I can work quickly and instinctively. And often when you work instinctively, you do things that are much better in proportion, much better seen, even if they're rough. Then there's something to refine. So that's the side of the charcoal. I can smudge it now with my fingers, but not just any old smudging. I'm trying to look at where some of these petals are a bit darker, or not so dark that I need to smudge them a bit. And you see that works it into the page. I'm working on some white cartridge paper, and a lot of the dark grey pastel that I put down is now a bit softer. So I can go on like this. I can work for quite a while. If I look with my eyes half closed, I would gradually build up some of these darker areas of the stems. And there's a shadow on this side of the pot. Gradually building that up, so that's nice and dramatic. It can be smudged, taken off a bit with my fingers. So your fingers get covered in charcoal, which is nice, because you can move it around. You can do a certain amount of drawing, just transferring the charcoal from one place to the next. Those stems are a bit thick, so if I'm concerned about that, I can draw with my rubber now. This is a plastic eraser, and I think they're best for sort of carving into charcoal, taking things away. But I'm not going to be too careful at this stage. It's quite encouraging to be able to adjust things if I'm really not happy with them. But I'm going to do a lot of the redrawing, the refining, by working with the colour. The pastel colours that go on top, they will do a lot of my redrawing and refining, as you'll see in a moment. But I'm getting some dark down first, because that's always very helpful. The chalk pastel colours, if they go onto a dark surface, they really stand out very well. And with these lovely flowers, which are so colourful and uplifting, I want to be able to produce a drawing that's got that bright, vibrant colour in it. So I've sprayed my drawing just with some hairspray. It's a cheap alternative to fixative. That needs a couple of minutes to dry, and then because I've fixed it, sealed it with the hairspray, I can actually just demonstrate to you how the charcoal doesn't come off anymore. It's sealed in under a layer of fixative, and so it won't smudge, it won't really rub out, but that's okay, because I'm not going to use the eraser anymore. I'm going to use pastel marks to refine the drawing. I'm looking at this vase of flowers against a white wall, but I think it might be quite nice to get a bit of colour around these flowers to really make those yellow, those vibrant yellows stand out. And I've decided that this bit of blue pastel is going to be a good colour. So I'm going to now draw the negative shape around these flowers in order to make them stand out. For example, up here then, I've got some petals there. So a little bit like what I did with the charcoal, I'm drawing round these flower shapes with the side of my pastel, and it does get confusing, I have to say. One petal to the next. Maybe when I was out the room they changed their position, or maybe I just didn't look too carefully at the beginning, but that's okay, because I'm just putting in some of these negative shapes, the spaces between the flowers and the stems, and I'm doing it with the side of the chalk pastel. So I'm sliding it around and I'm gradually making these parts of the flowers stand out. And as I say, it's a little bit confusing because they're so complicated, but that's okay. We can work with that and slowly sort things out. So that's most of the flowers that I want to work with on that side. There's this one here which is kind of upside down, so I'm just going to ignore that. That's a bit of editing. It's partly, well, it's not partly because I can't do it. I don't really want to do it. I want these two flowers, the bigger ones, to be nice and visible, and I want to make something of them. So I'm editing, I'm leaving out the things which don't help to make a good composition. So that's some of that blue background in. I made the blue background up, it's not there, but it seemed to me it would be a good colour to work with. And I'm going to smudge it a bit. So this pastel and charcoal drawing is done on just some white cartridge paper. Often people work with pastel on some tinted paper, grey paper or beige paper, but it's also quite nice to work on white. And if you do as I'm doing and put down some charcoal first and fix it, spray it, then in a way you get the best of both worlds. You get some nice dark drawing with the pastel, with the charcoal, which the pastel colours can sit on top of, but you also have the white of the paper showing through some of the colours in places so that they're more vibrant. So that's putting down some of the background colour, making the subject stand out a little bit. So now I'm hanging on to the pastels that I'm using, because I'll probably go back to them. So let's get a little bit of colour into this pot. So I've got a box of chalk pastels. I think there's about 48 colours in them, so that's great. There's a whole range of colours which will suit my subject in there. I've just put the blue of the pot, the stripe of the pot, over the charcoal, and because it was dark on that side, the charcoal was darker, and so the blue gets a bit darker. It's probably more obvious if I do some of the white for the white stripe. So I'm using what's underneath the charcoal layer to do some of that, create some of that contrast. And because I don't fill it in too solidly, the charcoal underneath can show through. Now I think I'll do, so let's hang on to that. We'll keep a stock of the colours used. Then I'm going to do some of the darker colours. I think that can be quite helpful. So the stem of that flower and the stem of that flower. And that's a dark green. So I'm going to do some of the darker or the more subdued colours, and then I'm going to lighten up as a next stage. This is basically blocking in, and as I'm saying, some of the charcoal showing through underneath is very helpful, especially with something like yellow. You can very often see through yellow. It doesn't, because it's such a light colour, doesn't always cover completely. A bit of yellow in there. So I take one colour at a time. This is the yellow for most of the flowers and their petals, and then I'll take another colour. I've obviously got to change that a bit, but this is fine to be building up some of those different shapes and gradually refining them. So I'm not making each flower perfect or finished. I'm getting things covered, getting rid of some of the white. So some of the trumpets of some of these daffodils are a bit more of an orangey yellow. So I've taken that pastel. And two. And I'll just try one more yellow, and then I'll just start to refine some of these yellower flowers first. So that's a lighter yellow. I've covered some of these areas with the pastel, but spread it out. I haven't really smudged it, but I've spread it out. Now I'm going to use the tip of this pastel so that I can really make a brighter, more definite mark. So that's starting to look for some of the light. And it was probably good to have done the dark colours first, so that these light colours can sit on top and stand out a little bit more. So that's one way of making some of these bright flowers stand out. Another way would be to gradually look again at some of these edges and go around the outline of some of those flowers. And that's why I thought the blue was quite a good idea, because it'll help me define the edges of some of these flowers. And I'm either smudging it so that it's a bit like what I put down at first when I did the negative shapes. I can either smudge it like that, and things will mix a bit, but that's okay. Or I might work in a bit of white again. So often with these pastels, there's a stage where it's quite good to smudge, but then I think you can get to a point where if you want to keep the colours clean, don't smudge them because your fingers won't be clean and you'll just mix all the colours together. Use two pastels, for example, like here. I want to clean up a bit around there at the front of that flower. I'll put down some white first and then some of the blue on top. I'm just mixing the colour on the drawing. So that's working around the flowers to make them stand out. I can also return to my charcoal. So for example, the trumpet of that particular flower is a bit darker at the side. The neck, before we get to the stem, is also dark. So I'm using the charcoal to darken some of these pastel colours, and as I've just demonstrated with doing the background colour, I can also mix charcoal into the pastel on the page. So I darken some areas and I make other areas more colourful. So having blocked in quite loosely some of the larger areas, I'm now working on smaller, more refining parts of the drawing, choosing to make things stand out. So this whole process now slows down a bit. It was quick to get everything covered, but now I'm slowing down and trying to decide what to refine, and in a way going in closer to make things stand out, emphasize in particular ways. So I've also got this nice sort of creamy yellow chalk as well, because some of these daffodils are not so much yellow as cream coloured. And that's another one I'm using, and then maybe some brown to get into the stems. And also maybe a slightly lighter green to get some contrast into those stems. So the process is slowed down a bit now, and my aim is to make some of these bright colours stand out. And I do that by darkening in some places, by bringing in the background colour, and eventually putting on some brighter, cleaner colour by not smudging so much, but more by working with the tip of the pastel and bringing the bright colour out. I feel as though there should be a petal down there. I think we might get a bit more warmth in here. And there. And this building up and mixing the pastel on the drawing can be quite quick. It's just small amounts that I'm putting in, and either knocking things back with a little bit of darkening, or bringing them out with some lighter emphasis. And I'm blowing the loose bits of dust away just so I see what I've got. So that's concentrating quite a lot on the flowers, but I should lean back, sit back, look at my whole drawing and see how things are coming together. I can also use a bit of white if I want some of these yellows to stand out. They might appreciate a bit more white in the mixture. And it's good again to mix these colours on the page. So there's white, but I'm mixing it a bit with the yellow, so that it's not just pure white. I've got my pot on a table, so I think maybe getting something off the table down here. Maybe I'll smudge it. See, my fingers are filthy now. So smudging is it's a necessary thing, but you just want to be aware of what's on the tip of your fingers. But it does help to get a little bit of that, to make that white disappear down there. And maybe I'll even do a little bit more to the edge of the pot. So I think there's always a balance between gradually refining your drawing, making the things that you are interested in and you want people to see stand out, but not getting so detailed that things start to fall apart. That can happen very easily with a drawing. If you focus on one bit and make it very detailed because you're really looking at your subject but you're not really looking at your drawing, then the drawing, in a way, it fragments, it falls apart. So you want to get a balance between doing detailed refinements in parts of the drawing and then doing something that brings everything together. Often the background, as I've demonstrated there, the negative shape of the background is helpful at bringing things together. And sometimes you've just got to make something in particular stand out. And that's another way of keeping the balance in the drawing. So I would go on with this probably for another 10 or 15 minutes. Probably take a break actually, because you can begin to get a little bit bored or a bit lost. It's good to come back after a break and see your drawing a bit more clearly. And if you, as I'm doing, line up the colours that you're working with, then you've got a sort of limited palette that you can keep going back to, and you don't get drawn into other things, but you stay with the set of colours that are working for you. So I've still more to do up here, but I think I'm going to stop for now. I'll work on it and take a photograph and put it at the end of the email, along with the handout, which will list the materials and have a bit of a step-by-step guide of the stages you could go through, starting with the charcoal drawing on white paper and then gradually building up, having fixed it, gradually building up areas of colour.